Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host Mark Snyder. There's an interesting writing Billy has, it's called Meditation from Clear Visibility. And the subtitle is High and Highest Meditation. I thought I'd read a little bit from this just to start the show out. The true richness of the meditative basis for a positive consciousness attitude rests in the true insight and in the true knowledge, experience, and living experience that the omnipotence of one's own thoughts and feelings steers all functions and all processes of the entire life. Opposed to this stands the blind belief in an all-directing God and in calamity-averting amulets, magical talismans, cult activities, and hallowed cult shrines. Holy rituals, relics, consecrated shrines hallowed by holy water, holy hosts, and wines, etc. Knowledge is in its essence wisdom and positive neutral might. Belief, by contrast, is a lack of understanding and a phenomena of a thought, feeling-based as well as a psychic consciousness-based, misdirected mechanisms without cognizance with regards to the creational spiritual and creational natural laws and recommendations. Billy goes on to explain and introduce these 77 meditative sentences that he says here, the meditative thoughts and feelings are thereby cultivated again and again by thinking or muttering several times daily, 3 to 4 times, a specific sentence for about 5 minutes, practicing consciousness, attentiveness to that which is spoken. One of the reasons I bring this up is that I've been using one of them, and I haven't used it that much today. I'm trying to find it. Let's see if I can remember it. It says, I always remain relaxed and thereby gain might over myself. I always remain relaxed and thereby I gain might over myself. I always remain relaxed and thereby I gain might over myself. You notice the second part of that sentence. It says, I gain and thereby gain might over myself. So there's actually... We're gaining power, we're gaining control over ourselves. And we do that through the might of the thoughts. And these meditative sentences can help put you back in a clear state of mind and can help snap you out of the negative thinking that sometimes we fall into. Let me read a few of these meditative sentences and then I'll move on. In order to live in today's world, I must be strong and develop tenacity with regard to my consciousness and my intellect. The calmer and more tenacious I become, the more I overcome difficulties. The creational natural power is within myself, and I use this actualizingly in my thinking and my acting. In my consciousness attitude, I change myself to the positive and utilize my creational natural power in me for this. I am strong within myself and I change my mental self-image to the positive. Everything is achievable for me and I master whatever I wish to accomplish. Anyway, these are the 77 meditative sentences. The writing is called Meditation from Clear Visibility, and I don't have the URL where you guys can find this. I'll have to get that in the future. Now, as you know probably by now, that Edward Albert Meier is a one-armed farmer from Switzerland. He's about 78 years old. He lives now in a tiny mountain village called Hinterschmid-Ruti, which is about 52 minutes east of Zurich. He has written over 40 books, and he's written over 600 booklets. And these booklets describe his contacts with extraterrestrial humans. And these human beings do not live on our Earth. They're extraterrestrial, and for years they've been called the Pleiadians, but they're not really from our Pleiades. The Pleiades has young blue suns that will never support life, not complex life anyway. And these extraterrestrials live in a star system about 80 light years beyond our Pleiades in a different space-time configuration. They live on a planet called Era. And they migrated to Era about 230,000 years ago from the Lyra Vega system. And they migrated there under the command of an individual called Asael, who was a king of wisdom, who had 200 leaders and sub-leaders with him. And they brought some thousands of people into this star system, and they terraformed about 3 planets there, one of which is very much like our Earth now. It's called Era. It has a similar biology. In fact, in our very ancient past, they brought plants and animals from Earth to Era. Now, the people on Era call themselves the Lyren. They have visited the Earth, and they had bases on the Earth. In 1995, the Lyren left the Earth, and they didn't tell us why. And that's when they revealed their true identity. Up until that time, the Lyren had bases in Switzerland, one of which was about 300 years old. And there were other extraterrestrial humans on the Earth that had bases in North America, in Asia. And there was a very interesting base in Mount Shasta and also in Mount Mammoth. And that base was for a people that call themselves the Hyperboreans. And the Hyperboreans are really originated in the North Polar regions, but that was hundreds of thousands of years ago. The Hyperboreans were on the Earth some 180,000 years. Now, if we switch gears back to the time of Atlantis and Lemuria just briefly, which was about 150,000 years ago, or excuse me, about 130,000 years ago, the extraterrestrials which came to the Earth and started building Atlantis and Lemuria wanted peace, and there was 2 groups. There was a group that followed a man named Atlant, and they built Atlantis, which was an island continent between South America and Europe, let's say, in that particular area. And another group followed a man named Muras, and they built the city of Mu. And these 2 cities lived in peace and happiness for quite some time. And other people came here. A group from Beta Centauri came to the Earth under the leadership of Eris the Barbarian, who was the one that attacked Hyperborea. And the Hyperboreans had to flee, and they went into Mount Shasta, about 700 of them, and they kind of hid there, and they made a little city. And some of them went to in areas near the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. But occasionally you'll see these golden-colored spacecraft leaving, I think it's the eastern slope of Mount Shasta. And they also have craft that come in at times. However, I think in 1995 the Hyperboreans left as well. I don't know what this event that's going to happen in our future is. I don't know if it's already happened, but really most of the extraterrestrial humans have left. The Hyperboreans, though, were very interesting. They were blonde-haired people. They pretty much stayed to themselves. Occasionally they would go down into the villages near Mount Shasta and interact with humans. A lot of times they had their own kind of beam weapons with them, and if they had to stun an Earth human for some reason, they would do that, but typically they were very peaceful people. One thing that's interesting about these Hyperboreans is they had their own king of wisdom, an Ishwish by the name of Zebulon, who commissioned Noah to build the ark. Now, this occurred 100,000 years ago, according to Meier information. And Noah was actually called Nokodemion, and he got all of his information from this extraterrestrial human who was related to these Hyperboreans. And Noah built this ark, and a massive flood did come, and the ark was kind of pushed up about 5,000 meters up the slope of Mount Ararat, and the waters receded, and the animals got out. The ark didn't land on the summit. If it had, the large 4-foot animals could have never made it down, but Noah was unusual, too. He wasn't that unusual for the time, but from our perspective, very unusual because he was over 10 feet tall. So he'd be considered a giant today. So the Hyperboreans, in some ways, have been on the Earth, or were on the Earth for such a long time, you could almost consider them Earth peoples. Well, the other group that was also here, that had another base up in the North Atlantic, were some people called the Hasters. And they were from this galaxy about 483 million light years away from the Earth. According to Meier material, it's called the Janam Galaxy. And these were very peaceful, very loving people. They were only about 1,120 years ahead of us in terms of their evolution. The Lyren brought some of the Hastur inhabitants here in their great ship, the Great Spacer, and they helped them build this station in the depths of the North Sea, on the bottom of the North Sea, evidently. And the Hasturs are closer to our level of evolution. In other words, their thought patterns are more consistent with ours, so they can stand to be in our presence for about 17 hours. And they will seek contact with one or two people on Earth, usually, just to study them. And they also instruct the Earth people to a degree. They also tell the Earth people that they talk to, they must remain silent for their whole life after they're contacted. So that's two groups that were here at one time. We also had people from nearby stars here. And some of the nearby stars here, I just want to throw these out. I don't know if these were we had people here from these for sure. But we have the whole Alpha Centauri system, which is about 4 light years away. Alpha Centauri A, B, and Proxima Centauri. We also have the Barnard star, which I think is a red dwarf, which is about 5 light years away. We had Lyrians here. We had people from the Tao universe here, which is a parallel universe to ours. So all these extraterrestrials left right around 1995. The Lyren revealed their true identity during that time, and that's kind of a sad state of affairs. I really don't know any more than that as far as why these people came. And I understand some of the reasons that they came, but not so much why they left immediately. So we're really here in a situation here on the Earth where we have to really depend on the teaching that's been left behind for us. And that's where we get back to the story of Edward Albert Meier, who grew up in Bulak, Switzerland, and started having telepathic messages from an extraterrestrial human by the name of Svath, who was about 900 years old. In fact, Svath had saved Billy's life when Billy was a small child, about 6 months old. He contracted a deadly pneumonia, and he almost died. And Svath, through some technical means, I assume, healed Billy. And Billy lived. When Billy got to the age of about 5 years old, he started getting telepathic messages from Svath, and he could see Svath's face sometimes. He could see certain images, and he was getting messages to go out in the forest and wait. And then at one point, Svath's pear-shaped craft came down. Billy was kind of lifted up, I think, through some kind of technological means into the ship. And Svath took Billy up into Earth orbit, where Billy got to see the Earth, the beautiful Earth from orbit. And Svath started to tell Billy about his mission on the Earth, and that he would be a teacher, and that he had done this before, and that he had been, in his previous lifetimes, he had been the people that today we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. And in each one of these lifetimes, he taught a universal teaching called the teaching of the Spirit that deals with defining things like the universal consciousness, defining reincarnation and how it works. This teaching describes the human spirit and how the human spirit operates. It also talks about learning to control our thinking, and that's why I started the show out with meditation from clear visibility. And it also discusses certain things like creational natural laws. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the laws of creation. The creation is the universal consciousness. And we have a universal consciousness in our universe. It's not a person or some personification. Now, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, the term God is really more of a personification of the real truth behind the concept, which is the universal consciousness. The universal consciousness is a kind of an impersonal spiritual energy. It doesn't enact any commandments for people to stipulate, to dictate, for people to follow. These commandments, they come down from certain higher spiritual realms, like the Patali level, which can transmit things like the Decalogue or the Dodecalogue, which eventually became what we call today the Ten Commandments. So the universal consciousness is what's called in the Meier material, in the German, the Wesenheiten. And the Wesenheiten doesn't really so much control its own evolution. The creational universal consciousness evolves according to this predetermined set of plans. And it's really neither good nor evil. It is neutral. It's harmoniously balanced. But it radiates love. And the Meier information explains it this way, that the incredible splendor of nature is the visible expression of the love of creation. And creation radiates love. And love is the highest principle in all creation. And everything follows that principle in absolute logic. Every tiny plant and every tiny animal fulfills its purpose in love. Love will continually be the purpose for our existence. Plants, animals, bushes, trees, everything that crawls and flies on the earth is a life form with a spirit form. And these spirit forms, they live many, many lifetimes. And these creatures are connected by psychic vibrations. And if you go into the forest, you can watch the birds as they move in unison. You can listen to the crickets and the cicadas talk with each other. And all of creation works as an integrated whole. It's an indissoluble web of life out there. And the death is just the passage into the realm of pure spirit. So we all have the human spirit. And a human spirit never dies. It cannot be harmed by anything in the material world. And we have a spiritual consciousness as well as a material consciousness. The spiritual consciousness does not cease to exist. It never dies. And it never sleeps. It records everything that we do. It will tell you if your thinking is right or wrong if you've learned to pay attention to it. The human spirit comes into the midbrain of the child at 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg. This area in the brain is called the superior colliculus. It controls our thought processes. It controls the gaze, the looking. Now, our spiritual consciousness does have its own thoughts and feelings, as does the material consciousness. What directs the thoughts and the feelings of the spiritual consciousness is something called the Gemut. And there's also a universal Gemut in the universal consciousness. The spiritual consciousness only operates in a neutral positive manner. It doesn't respond to any thoughts that are not neutral positive. It doesn't have any of its own thoughts that aren't neutral positive. It impulses the material consciousness. And it also sends what are called the swinging waves to the psyche. Your psyche controls the thoughts and the feelings of the material consciousness. The material consciousness is what dies. The material consciousness, every reincarnation, is recreated. Deep within your subconscious is the memory of your predecessor personalities. So that new child in its next reincarnation will benefit to a certain extent from the wisdom of its predecessor personalities. And that's why it's so important to learn and expand and evolve your consciousness with each lifetime. So, one of the laws of creation is the law of reincarnation, because our spirit forms live many, many lives. One of the other laws of creation is striving, and that all creatures, striving is the fundamental law of all evolution. Without striving, there is no life. And animals strive, they have to work. We all have to work. And your happiness is related to your striving. And it's almost impossible for a person to be happy if they're lazy and they're not doing work. You should be striving to evolve yourself in every way that you possibly can. Of course, we need rest at times, but striving is a fundamental law of evolution. And it's really the purpose. You see, the universal consciousness creates human spirits so it can achieve its own evolution. All these spirits come from the universal consciousness. Yours did, mine did. And we live many, many material lifetimes. According to the book The Psyche, about 42 million years we will reincarnate into a purely physical body. And I want to go back and talk a little bit about this purely spiritual process of the Gemut again. And again, the Gemut does not belong to the physical body. Neither does what I'm talking about, the Empfinden. The Empfinden only receives the swinging waves, which are of a purely spiritual nature, and thus, in a spiritual sense, neutral positive. The Empfindungen can solely and exclusively occur in the spiritual realm. And there's a person is called a sensitivat when she or he is capable of sensing the fine spiritual perception, the Empfinden, and they can receive the swinging waves. So it's when you have the ability of a fine spiritual perception, and when I was talking about nature, Billy's writing called The Goblet of Truth, where he says what the truth knows to say. Rivers, stones, plants, trees, bushes, trees, everything which crawls and flies on the earth is a life form with a spirit form, and these spirit forms live many, many lifetimes. And all of these creatures are aware of each other. And that's where they starts to talk about these swinging waves. But we reincarnate for about 42 million years into a completely physical body. And then we switch to the fifth stage of our evolution, where we become half physical and half spiritual. And at that point, there's a fundamental change, because we no longer have the need for a physical body anymore. But that's way down the line before we get there. Typically, the normal Earth human is 4 to 5 million years old in terms of their evolution. Homo sapiens first started to develop from primates on the Earth about 9 to 12 million years ago. About 4 to 5 million years ago, the naturally evolving Earth human became completely human. And at that point, I assume, is when the human spirit would reincarnate into early Homo sapien. Fundamentally, in many ways, different than other spirit forms of the animals and plants. Now, there are older Earth humans on the Earth that have been here 8 to 12 million years. They're spirit forms. And they came here on ships, and they would include people that died during the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, and at least 2 civilizations that went farther back than that. So life here on the Earth is pretty ancient, although our anthropologists and scientists haven't yet understood and recognized that yet. Because we are living in what's called the third millennium. And the third millennium is a time of confusion and maliciousness that has spread over the earth because we no longer understand what the creation is. We don't understand these creational natural laws, the fundamental law, which is love, the second law, which is striving. And one of the things that has happened in the third millennium is mass migrations of people, which are threatening mankind. And the prophets in the Nokodemion line, named Jeremiah and Elijah, forecast the time we're living in now. And it talked about this time that we're facing. Let me read a little something here. It says, fundamentally, the worldwide overpopulation is the cardinal cause for this, because for more and more human beings in the world, there are less and less living space, food, healthy air, drinking water, jobs, housing, recreation areas, healthy nature. And let me emphasize healthy nature, because healthy nature is so important to the psyche, to the mindset, to the thought pattern of human beings. Living in an urban environment takes a terrible toll on the human being, and the overcrowded and the constant noise and no interaction with nature. Because, our forests they moderate our weather because they absorb excess water, they provide shade, they slow the wind down. They do so many things that we don't understand. But unfortunately, what we keep doing is increasing our population and destroying our forests around the world. And the forests sustain life. But we continue to cut the trees down to make room for agricultural land to feed these people. And the global overpopulation, it brings greenhouse effect, too much carbon dioxide. We have the terrible chemtrails from the planes now, and who knows if they're spraying or not, or this is just purely some strange effect that's occurred in our skies because of who knows what conditions that exist now. The Goblet of Truth talks about this mass migration of people and the overpopulation that we're facing. Through your self-acquired characteristic of constantly concentrating solely on the material, you human beings of Earth have effectively made yourselves master of the coarse substantial world. I want to talk a little bit about our concentration on the material. And this is quite unfortunate because the meaning of life comes from the spiritual. Your spirit form is the real you. That's the you that has lived many, many, many lifetimes, millions of lifetimes. Your deepest knowing and understanding comes from your spirit form. The truth, when you determine the truth for yourself, it comes from the innermost thinking, the innermost feelings, and the innermost contemplations. Today, we do not evaluate the truth in that manner. We look totally on the physical, and we set aside the deepest intuitions of the human spirit, and we put our blinders on when we do that. And that's with that kind of thinking, you can go forward robotically and destroy an entire rainforest and never understand the horrific damage that you're doing that can last for centuries and thousands of years. When we no longer find in, which is the fine spiritual perception, when we no longer perceive that way, we become like robotic automatons, which can be like destroying machines. And that's the way we've become on the earth. And I think that's what's divorced us from so many realities of life. And I think it manifests itself in the incredible noise and racket that is passed off as music, because people live in these overcrowded cities, and that's what they're reflecting, the noise of the urban environment. You see, and that's why you get extreme tattoos over the body and people putting these, pointy objects through their lips and their nose. And it's self-mutilation. It's because people and within their spirits are crying out in distress. And that's what's happened here in the third millennium. It's a time of confusion and maliciousness. So let me continue here. The human beings of the earth had effectively made yourselves to masters of your coarse substantial world. And as a result of your doing, handling, and acting, the material world has become dependent on you. This is something I don't completely wrap my mind around yet. But you use this dependence of your world to torment in every imaginable way. For example, through chemistry, irresponsible exploitation of the resources. I go back to the forests on that. Through overpopulation. And it goes on and on to talk about hatred, war, torture, the eradication of animals and birds and fish species, and all of the crimes that we're committing in our incredible ignorance here on the earth. In 1951, Billy wrote a letter that said the following: "Yes, yet this is not all, because through the continually growing overpopulation, which is already in 50 years will have increased to 6 billion, this is old, We're now closer to 9 billion. And it has been predicted many monstrous and insoluble problems will arise. Famines will increase, while old diseases, believing to be eradicated, will return. Through mass tourism from the industrialized countries, these countries will become inundated with economic refugees from the entire world, as a monstrous problem with the asylum seekers who become insoluble. And it is predicted that at the end of the 80s, the boom will collapse and worldwide monstrous and unprecedented unemployment will break out, whereby criminality at the hands of the unemployed will climb, as it will through criminal gangs from the so-called third world countries who spread out into the industrialized countries and will not even shy away from murder in pursuit of their misdeeds. And Sloth told Billy that we live in a time called the third millennium, a time of maliciousness and confusion which spreads throughout the earth, which started when we dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we killed hundreds of thousands of people. And there may come a time here in North America when biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons run out of control, and they'll run through the automated systems which won't be able to be stopped. And this will be the greatest disaster in recorded history that will come to the area of North America, and it's prophesied in the Enoch prophecies. And one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit quickly is the refugees. And due to the many human beings thoroughly mixing from different cultures with foreign languages, customs, traditions, and religions and so forth, the danger grows that the native human being feels like a stranger in their own country, and their sense of belonging and feeling and identity of their culture is hollowed out. Well, let me jump ahead a little bit here, because there's something that's very much unknown by the people of the earth. And that's about the biological and genetic consequences from the mixing of all these people of different races. Furthermore, the impending baleful effects of the mixing of peoples in various contact conversation between Bean and the Pleiar and friends were addressed. Billy says, my next question concerns the mixing of peoples. You and Quetzal, as well as Semyase, all of you had previously explained this to me, that the mixing of peoples in great amounts as they, for example, come about through the war and asylum seekers and the whole migrations or partial migrations of people, as well as the great immigrations and so forth, brings extremely great danger for the existence of humankind, namely due to the widely mixing of bloods and genetic influences, and as a result of which the human being would become soft and unable to cope with life, becoming susceptible to disease. So as much as our insane mass media talks about the importance of mixing all these people, it couldn't be farther from the truth. It is an insane thing to be mixing all of these people of different races and different cultures, because we evolved genetically in a specific region of the earth, and we adapt to that region. Our skin color adapts, our hair adapts. Some of us will retain the abilities to grow beards, to stay warmer. Our bodies change to deal with colder climate or warmer climate. So when the races start to mix, they undo all the genetic evolution that has occurred through centuries, even thousands of years, and they weaken their immune systems. And this is a very, very dangerous thing to do. Let me continue here. As a result of which, the human being will become soft and unable to cope with life, as well as becoming susceptible to disease. And as a result, as you have explained, over time the world would emerge with such degenerative changes in human beings, so that some in different peoples or tribes would become extinct. For this, I just wanted to ask if I interpreted that correctly. And Ptah says, your explanation responds to the rightness. Mixing of the peoples, always and everywhere, signifies a major threat to the continued existence of humankind. All things considered, different kinds of people, to a great extent, should and must not mix amongst one another. That is to say, with each other, because a degeneration inevitably appears, and the human being gets pushed to the edge of their life uncapability. Anyway, it's a tremendous thing. We are an insane society rushing headlong to our own destruction, and only a mass change of consciousness can save us from the inevitable disasters that are approaching our world. But we don't have to experience these. If we begin to learn some of these creational natural laws that I've been talking about, and one of these important creational natural laws is reincarnation, and understanding that you will be coming back to this world to deal with these problems in a future lifetime, when these problems have become even worse. So it's time for a wake-up call for all the people of the earth, because nature works by a balance, and we have to maintain this balance among all different species, among all different plants and animals. And one of the most important things to maintaining a balance is maintaining the balance of your own thoughts. Because as these difficult circumstances continue to evolve, one of the things you're going to have to do is remain relaxed. And that's why I talked about this sentence from the 77 Meditations. I always remain relaxed and thereby gain might over myself. And this is, when first reading this, it is not naturally clear what it means, or at least we think it is. But is that really true? This sentence needs to be thought about intensively, because the key here is regaining might over myself. I'm gaining might over myself. Now, how do I do that? By always remaining relaxed, for one thing, but by understanding the incredible power of your own thoughts, because you are the master of your own destiny. The incredible power of your own thinking will produce in you good feelings. And good feelings, Gefühl in the German, which are feelings which come out of the thoughts, fuel good habits. And good habits lead to good circumstances in your life. And out of the consciousness grow the circumstances of your life. Out of your own thoughts come the circumstances of your life. And you have a creational power which rises up out of your own thoughts. And your thinking is of such immense power that if your thinking is neutral balanced, it will continually bring into creation everything that you desire in your life. But the problem is the human being continually thinks unconsciously, and our unconscious thoughts start to bring things into our life that we don't even want. And we continue to have unconscious thoughts, which we don't even want. And we have wrong hopes and wrong desires for things which will only bring us misery. And people cultivate their addictions, and they cultivate the wrong thinking. But we need to learn to steer the good, neutral, positive thoughts, which generate the neutral positive circumstances in your life. You are the master of your own destiny. Your thoughts are such a monstrous power that they will continually bring into existence everything that you desire. If they're neutral positive, if your thinking and your knowledge is correct. Your thoughts go out into the universe, and they go way out there, and they eventually come back to you. And if they're a good neutral positive thought, they'll come back a good neutral positive thought. But if they're a little off the midline in terms of the polarity, if they're a little too positive, they'll come back to you more negative. If they're a little too negative, they'll come back to you more positive. So the universal consciousness is continually pushing us back into this harmonious balance. And you should ask yourself 3 things every day. Have I harmonized my own personality today? Have I evolved my consciousness today? Have I helped my fellow living things today? You should harmonize your personality every day. You should bring it back in a neutral, positive balance. Because you are the master of your own life. You're the master of your own destiny. And it's the good, neutral, positive thoughts that bring balance and peace into your life. And it's important for us to learn the responsibility of self-awareness and of constantly looking at and evaluating your own thoughts and to determine if they're neutral positive or if they're not neutral positive. Now, I meant for this to be a little bit more of an overview of the Billy Meier information, so I'm going to get back to my overview. I talked about Billy's first contacts with Sloth, which occurred beginning in about 1945, and Sloth was a very important mentor for Billy. But when Billy was about 16 years old, he was told that he would get his next extraterrestrial mentor, which is a woman named Asket, who brought a robotic ship to Switzerland, which landed on top of a hill. And Billy walked up the hill, cold evening in Switzerland, and was pulled into the ship, which darted off for a great distance over to Jordan, and the ship became invisible, and Billy became invisible, and eventually got out of the ship in Jordan. And Billy had to wait for Asket to show up for quite some time. Eventually, her ship landed pretty quickly, but it took her about half an hour to get out of the ship. And I wanted to read a little bit that some of the things that Asket told Billy in one of their first meetings. She said, "The creation is the foundation of life and of being. We fulfill our mission in the strength of creation, which has not only cosmic but universal significance, because creation is life and creation is being. And to fulfill our mission, we have to neutralize the space-time connection barrier between our and your universes, so that we can achieve a harmonious passage without damage to ships and universes. Because our home world lies in the Tao universe, in the Akon system, in a system foreign to you, Earth humans, of a universe just as foreign to you, of which several surround the universe known to you on the 7th outer belt." So our universe, which the Meier information calls the Dern universe, has 7 belts which counter-rotate around each other, and our universe is roughly like a ellipse, and it has these 7 rotating belts, and the 4th layer is the material belt, where all the planets and solar systems and galaxies are. And the Tao universe is just one of the universes that's adjacent to us. And Asket's people, known as the Timmers, have a technology which allows them to neutralize the space-time connection barrier between the universe, and they can get this harmonious passage between the two universes. And our universe and the Tao universe were created, I assume, in the same Big Bang, 46 trillion years ago. They're the same age. And the Asket's people were originally from our universe, and they moved into this other universe. But let me continue here as she talks about these other universes that are in other time planes. Many of these universes lie in other time planes, and in you, for you, expanses of utter foreignness. Our universe is a parallel sister universe to ours. The Tao universe is parallel to ours. It's a sister universe, a twin universe. And calculated according to your concepts, it lies in a similar plane. The difference between your time and ours is only very slight. Now, the Meier material talks about these different time-space configurations. The Pleiaren are in a different time-space configuration. I started the show out talking about the planet era. So there's not only hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy, but some of these star systems are in different time planes. She continues here. The reason for our coming into this, your Dern universe, lies in earlier times that are calculated in several centuries, and indeed in the urge to explore, and in a fulfillment of an obligation of our race, who in earlier times came from your DERN universe. Made possible through technical developments, an ancient universe barrier was opened again between our universe and your universe that guaranteed us entrance into your time, after which the knowledge about it, lost many thousands of years ago, was worked out again. Since then, we again explored the expanses of your universe, and several centuries ago discovered this solar system, and there within this world, whose inhabitants show a very old connection with the Pleiadians, or the Pleiaren, as you name them for certain reasons, and in which also are involved, also in the form that which pertains to the mission. To be precise, the centuries, by your time reckoning, line up to 33, during which we were able to travel and explore your universe. Through our incessant explorations, we again found this world as well as our original homeland, and the very distant descendants of those who, from the earliest time, were the responsible ones who were relevant to the human life of this world, because a portion of the humans of the earth were not born here. Remember me talking about that certain human beings here have older spirit forms. They're 8 to 12 million years old, where a typical Earth human has a spirit form about 4 to 5 million years old. That is the case, and Asket explains this in more detail. She says, many are descendants of those who came out of the expanse of outer space, and indeed from the space that you name Lyra and Vega, with the eye of God, the Ring Nebula. The Ring Nebula was created by one of these kings of wisdom when my understanding is that he destroyed a star, and they call it JHWH Mata, the eye of God, which is for them a symbol of what human beings can do in destructive power when they're, as they put it, out of control of the good human nature, Askartit. And she continues, in those territories, namely the real and ultimate goal, the original homeland of the later terrestrial races. Certainly today, the actual direct descendants of the terrestrial forefathers no longer populate the territory. In spaces and systems around the Ring Nebula and the Vega and Lyra heavenly bodies, in a space-time shifted configuration. These people were also in a different space-time configuration, the Lyrians. And she goes on to talk about the Pleiaren that live, in another space-time configuration beyond the Pleiades. And it says that they are distant descendants of your actual original forefathers. So, Askett goes on and on here. It's a very, very interesting discussion between Billy and Askett. This is Askett's Explanations number 1, which has a lot of information about our future and information about what has happened in our past and some of the things that have gone on. Billy took a first trip with Askett far below the Giza Plateau, where he saw an extraterrestrial group called the Giza Intelligences, which had a whole lot to do with the manipulation of Earth humans through religion. They also influenced Hitler through Giza Intelligences, through a man, I believe his name was Hermann Steinschneider, and through the Thule Society influenced Hitler to the worse. Hitler would have actually been a good influence on mankind if he hadn't been distorted by the Giza Intelligences. Other interesting contacts that Billy had in one of his meetings with Askett, if they went back in time, with a traveling companion named Jitsi, and they landed in 32 A.D. outside of Jerusalem. And that's where Edward Albert Meier met one of his earlier incarnations named Emmanuel. And that was probably one of his strangest contacts. Billy continued to meet with Askett when he was studying at the Ashoka Ashram in India. And eventually, after 11 years, Billy's contacts ended with Askett, and then he went back to Switzerland, where he lived a normal life with his wife for 11 years. They had 3 children, and then his second set of contacts started with Semyase right around 1975. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed the show this afternoon. You've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. I will be on Revolution Radio tonight. Bart Sibrel will be joining me at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to be talking about the moon landings. And as the Meier information says, there was a hoax involved in the moon landings. So, thanks for listening. Have a good afternoon, and we'll talk to you next time.